one of the things that kind of we keep coming back to in this class is this idea that a lot of times the people that write Linux don't want to have to do a lot of extra typing. So a lot of the commands that we have in here are abbreviated. If I want to change the password, I type passwd. I don't actually type out the whole password. If I want to list all the files, I can just type ls instead of typing out the full word list. Um, there's another way to use chmod that's a little bit more straightforward. Well, it's this. It involves less typing, but you have to do some math in your head. For some of you, that's not something that you're used to doing, I would imagine, and this is going to seem a little bit weird. But here's what I want you guys to think about. I'm going to use this little notepad over here I have just to illustrate how this works. But what I want you to do is imagine that we've got a numerical value that is assigned to each one of these letters. Every R is going to be a 4, every 2 is going to, or every W is going to be a 2, and every X is going to be a 1. So what I've got is something that looks like this. Now, the thing that makes it convenient to use 4 and 2 and 1 is if I give you one number that represents this first combination of 3 letters, and I can get a unique number by adding up 4 and 2 and 1. So the idea behind this is if I say the permission is say 664, what you know is that for the first RWX, you're going to add up these numbers in a way that gives you 6. Well, the only way you can get 6 here is to add 4 and 2. The only way you can get 6 here is to add 4 and 2. The only way you can get 4 here is to just type R. So what you're going to do is you would assume that 664 corresponds to RW RW R. Okay. Now that may not seem completely clear so far, but let me show you what that means. So what if I want to use chmod in this way? What I can do is I can say chmod 664 and then give it the name of the file. And what happens then is regardless of the state that that started in, you can see that what I've got is RW. Well, I got that here by getting to 6, and then RW 6, and then R is going to be 4. So that's how that works. Hang on just a second. Now the math behind this may seem a little bit weird. Generally when I explain this to students for the first time, they have to sort of work out the math behind it to prove to themselves that there's not a way of writing something like this that could be ambiguous. And the easiest way to think about it is to actually think about what this would look like if we were going to write out all possible things. Well, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The possible numbers that you could assign to this are 0 through 7. And so those are all going to have sort of chmod values that they correspond to. If you set something to 0, it's going to have no permissions at all. So if I say chmod 660 test file, let me do 600. You can see that what I've got here is something that has no permissions for everybody except for the user, right? Well, 1 is going to be, it's going to have executable permission, right? So that's going to be nothing, nothing executable. 2 is going to be nothing, write, nothing. 3 is going to be nothing, write, executable. 4 is going to be read, nothing, nothing. 5 is going to be read, nothing, execute. Then 6 is going to be read, write, nothing, and then 7 is going to be read, write, execute. So if you set something to 777, chmodding a file to 777 here is a way of just saying I'm giving everybody that has access to the system sort of the most possible permissions that they can have. Anybody is allowed to do anything to this file. This is not necessarily something that you're going to want to do if everything is secure, if you're trying to keep files secure in your system, but this is a way to sort of make sure that everybody can get to a file. A lot of times I've seen people, if if Linux is having trouble accessing a file, they'll turn around and make the file 777 just to make sure that it's not a file permissions issue that they're dealing with, and something like that's a way to just to help with troubleshooting. But I think what you'll find is when we're talking about using chmod, we're generally going to use at least 3 numbers. There's a way to use 4 numbers, but that means something else that we're going to get into the next video that has to do with what are referred to as special permissions. But for now, what we're talking about is just setting the permissions for the user, the group, and then other, meaning other people on the system. And when you get used to Linux, to using Linux, this way of using chmod actually is a lot handier than saying, okay, gee, it's going to be O minus G and then R plus, and that kind of stuff. This is because a lot of times you'll have sort of your go-to things that that you'll remember in terms of how you're going to set up your Linux files. So most of the if you're dealing with text files, one of the things that's a sort of a common way of setting them up is either 664 or 644, depending on if you want to let the group have access to something like that. But this is a way that that you can use chmod that's a little easier. Is kind of where we're going with this whole thing. What I'd like you to do is go ahead and create a test file here, and then change the permissions using chmod, both the way that we demonstrated in the last video and the way that we're demonstrating now. It's worth playing with to make sure you've got it. So.